Between 1930s and the 1950s, those who have become Christians in northern Nigeria were less than 500,000. Now, between 1950s, that's the mid-50s, to independence 1960, the massive growth of Christianity was phenomenal. And by this time, you already had millions of Christians in northern Nigeria. In fact, mid-1950s to the early 60s, northern Nigeria was the fastest growing church in the whole world. What was the reason for the rapid expansion of Christianity in northern Nigeria? The major reason was education.
You're on to Weighty Matters of the Heart.
You're welcome to a fresh episode of the Weighty Matters of the Heart. This program is actually sponsored by the Association of Christian Schools in Nigeria. We are still talking about the issue of the power of Christian education. In the last episode, where we featured Archbishop Kwashi, you were able to hear from a beneficiary of Christian education. It was powerful, it was touching, and very inspired. Today we have another personality who has been there and also is even specialized in issues of Christian education and its history. It's no other person than our brother, a father, and our grandfather, Professor Turaki. I'm about to introduce him. Please just stay tuned.
You're on to Weighty Matters of the Heart.
Want to welcome everyone to this series on Christian education and its power in bringing about transformation of lives, our society, our community, and what have you. And we are very privileged to have our father, our uncle, grandfather, Professor Yusufu Turaki, a distinguished professor of theology and social ethics at Jos Ekwa Theological Seminary, director, Center for the Study of Religion, Church and Society, and is an ordained minister. In the course of our discussion, I will bring out more for you to know what he has been involved in so much. And we'll just allow him to begin to speak. Then as I interrupt him once in a while, I'll bring back more about who he is. But let me just mention here that he's an executive director or secretary of Ethics, Peace and Justice Commission of the Association of the Evangelicals of Africa, Kenya, an associate research fellow, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies in Nigeria. He holds a PhD in social ethics, Boston University, USA, and is a postdoctoral research fellow at Yale University, that's Divinity School, Yale University, USA. Sir, you are welcome. We are very privileged to have you take on this very, very critical issue, Christian education and its effectiveness. Please help us get back to the past. You have lived long enough. You've experienced what many of us have not experienced. Take us back to the beginning of issues of Christian education.
You're on to Weighty Matters of the Heart.
Thank you very much for this opportunity that you have given me to come and share our background understanding of the origins of Christian education in Nigeria. Before I come to that, I think we should go back to the very beginning. We begin with God, who created the heavens and the earth. God did not use any other thing to create the heavens and the earth. He spoke. That demonstrates his power. The power that is embedded in his speech the word of his power. So when he speaks, things happen. And our God, who created the heavens and the earth, is a God of law and order. And without law and order, creation would be impossible. And so when God created the universe based upon his law and order, he then created the earth and then created humanity. And God placed humanity on earth. And he did that based upon his law and order. So God did not create a chaotic universe or a chaotic earth, but everything is based upon law and order. And any human being or any moral agent that will enter into the creation of God, that person must live in terms of law and order. And so God created us human beings. But a human being, God created him into basically three parts. First, the spiritual part of a human being, so the spirit. And then the second part, the soul, the mind. And then the third part is the body, the human body. So a human being is spirit, is soul, and is body. These three parts, when you put them together, they form a human being. So a human being is a composite of law and order as created by God. And every part of a human being functions according to the role and function which God has created to serve the life of a human being. And so we will be discussing later when we talked about the moral education, Christian education. Christian education is based on the fact which we have already stated, that God created law and order. And Christian education is an explanation of this law and order as it affects a human being. Our parents, what I mean by that, our African parents, our ancestors, they created for us our societies based upon basic principles. The first one is that they were able to create our ethnicity, our identity, and our history. And then secondly, our parents were able to create for us our land, our geography, our territory where we live on. And thirdly, they created our religion. And fourth, they created our culture. Now, when you have these four things, ethnicity, land, religion, and culture, our lives is being controlled by these four primal social factors. The way we see things, the way we understand things, and the way we interpret things, and the way we apply things is based upon our worldview. And our worldview is formed by these four primal social factors: ethnicity, land, religion, and culture. Put the four together, they form our worldview. Now, our ancestors developed their own religion, which they use as a way of guiding their own lives in relationship to whoever they believe is the creator of the universe. And our people serve various gods, various divinities, and various heroes or ancestors. Now, what our people didn't know is that they didn't know that God speaks, and that God guides, and that God issues laws to people to live by. In our own societal setup by our ancestors, they worship a god, or they worship gods whom they did not know very well. And they develop all kinds of religious artifacts or religious elements which guided their lives. But one of the unfortunate things that happened to our ancestors is that they didn't have a true knowledge of God. After many centuries, another religion arose in the Middle East, in Palestine. Jewish religion, we call it Judaism. And then after Judaism, we have Christianity. Christianity came out of Judaism. And Jesus Christ, who started Christianity in Palestine, was himself a Jew. But the scriptures, the Bible teaches us and informs us that this Jesus that was born as a human being was God himself, who took up the human flesh and was born through a Virgin Mary. And because of that, Jesus came in order to save human beings from their sin. Now, we didn't have time to go back to the origin that when God created Adam and Eve, the first parents, that they disobeyed God and broke the command of God and fell into sin. And it is because of their fall into sin that God decided to make a way of bringing man and woman back to himself. And that is why God had to send his Son. Now, in Christianity, our Godhead, God himself, exists in three persons: Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So God the Father planned our salvation, and God the Son, Jesus Christ, executed God's plan of salvation. And then God the Holy Spirit now takes that which Jesus has done on the cross of Calvary and applies it to us as sinners by bringing us to the saving knowledge of God himself through Jesus Christ and what he has done on the cross. Now, Christianity became a religion that spread throughout the world. And then the missionaries who were converted, the Europeans who were converted, they brought the gospel of Jesus Christ to us in Africa. But before the Europeans came, the Palestinians, the Jews, and the Africans who received Christianity first, they took it to Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and to some extent Morocco. They first brought Christianity to the northern part of Africa. But Christianity did not cross the Sahara Desert and stayed in North Africa. It was the European who now brought Christianity in the 14th and 15th centuries, the Portuguese. But the Portuguese stayed only at the coast. They didn't enter the hinterland. It was in the 18th and 19th century that faith missions started in Europe and North America, and they were the ones who brought Christianity to the hinterland, the interior of Africa. Now, with us in Nigeria, the first missionaries that came to us in Nigeria, they came the CMS, Church Missionary Society, first arrived at the coast of Nigeria, Badagry in particular. And then the Methodists also came up and brought Christianity. And then the Presbyterians, they also brought Christianity, and it all was in the coast of Nigeria. It was the CMS, Church Missionary Society, the Sudan Interior Mission, the Sudan United Mission, the Dutch Reform Mission, that took Christianity into the hinterlands, into the interior parts of Africa. And when the missionaries came, they made our ancestors who were worshipping their gods, because our ancestors had so many gods whom they worship. And then the Christian missions brought Christianity, and this was how Christianity got into both the coastal areas and the interior areas of Africa, that Christianity was brought. But now, having said this background, let me say specifically Nigeria, and in particular the northern parts of Nigeria. The British colonial masters, the French, the German, and other European nations, they went out to colonize the whole world. And some of them came to the part of West Africa, the British, the French, and the Germans. They came to West Africa and established their colonies, or they fought wars with our ancestors and conquered them and established colonial rule over them. Now, in northern Nigeria, the part that we call northern Nigeria, the first Christian missions that arrived in northern Nigeria were the missionaries from Church Missionary Society, CMS. The second group that came were Sudan Interior Mission, SIM. And the third group that came, Sudan United Mission, SUM. And then the others, Dutch Reform Mission, and then the other United Missionary Society, UMS, and many others, the Baptists, and the Catholics, they all came to the northern parts of Nigeria much later than the ones that started Christianity in the southern part of Nigeria. Now, what concerns us in Christian education is to know this background, that the colonial masters came and established their colonial rule over our lands. Now, the colonial masters came with one single purpose, is to establish their colonial rule over our people. Christian missions came with one singular purpose, is to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ. So you have two things that the Europeans brought. They brought the crown, or the empire of the nations in Europe, okay, the empires. British established an empire, the Germans had their own, the French had their own, and all these empires came out to Africa and established their colonial rule in different parts. So that was their concern. Their concern was to establish the colonial rule, while Christian missions came to establish the Church of Jesus Christ. Okay, so the church and the empire all came from Europeans. But what concerns us most is the work of Christian missions. The most powerful instrument that Christian mission use in order to propagate or to evangelize Africans was education, the tool of education. When the British came, their major concern was to establish colonial rule. But how do you establish colonial rule without education? So the British were able to provide only scanty education to the places where they established their colonial rule. Now, when they arrived in northern Nigeria could be broadly divided into two religions. The traditional African religion and then Islam. So these were the two religions that were in Nigeria. Traditional religions and Islamic religion. All right. Now, the colonial masters now work with Muslims in the north as Muslims in establishing their colonial rule over Muslims. Then the traditionalists were also there, but the colonial masters didn't pay much attention to the traditional societies. They didn't pay much attention to that. They paid much attention to Muslim societies. When Christian missions arrived, because both of them arrived simultaneously in northern Nigeria. So when they arrived, the colonial masters, that's the British colonial masters, advised Christian missions not to enter Islamic societies, but let them go to the traditional societies and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to the traditional Africans.
You're on to weighty matters of the heart.
Welcome back. You just listened to the beginning of the history of Christian education in Nigeria from a specialist, one who has researched, one who is qualified, Professor Turaki, Yusufu Turaki. And I want to remind us that the power of Christian education has not diminished with the passing of years. We only need to wake up to discover how to prepare for our future. I want to plead with us, all owners of mission Christian schools, to rise up, to pick this history. We're going to run through this series and make it an enrichment curriculum in your schools, because history is important in preparing for the future. Before I make the concluding statements, I want you to listen to this message. Thank you. Are you surrendering your children to the satanic forces of secular education? Authentic Christian education is the answer to the moral confusion of the world today. It is about regaining our original identity as humans made in the image of God and getting all our faculties to function optimally. Discipleship and academic excellence are inseparable in Christian schools. Let's kill cheating and crown Jesus as Lord over our schools. This message is from the President of the Association of Christian Schools in Nigeria. Thank you. Yes, the time of sleeping is over. To secure the next generation, all of us who are called into the ministry of education, Christian education, must rise up and discover the power that God has invested in Christian education and make sure that we make full proof of our ministry. Excuse me, what will we tell God? That we made merchandise of the souls of our children, or we equip them to be different, to be kingdom-minded, to make their own contribution in society, to become salt and light here, and be prepared to make it to heaven. The ball is in our courts. It's better to close down that school if you're not ready to touch the lives of these children than to just run it as a business center. God bless you.